We've got 5 prominent anti-2A legislators that did not do so hot on Super Tuesday. We're going to wrap up some of the things from our election live stream. Let's talk about it. Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel today. That is right, I wanted to do a little bit of a round out of the live stream that we did earlier this week as we hung out for a little while and watched the votes come in on Super Tuesday. There were a few candidates that we were focused on who haven't exactly been friendly to the Second Amendment community. We're going to go over some of those again today. Here to do it, not in studio this time, but over Zoom, is our legislative director. He is also the host of Firing Line Radio. You can catch him every Saturday on AM 590 The Answer. That is Rick Travis. Rick, thank you for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, Rick, actually, before we get into some of these anti-2A candidates that didn't do so hot on Super Tuesday, I wanted to talk to you about some of the CRPA Political Action Committee endorsements, some of these candidates that do look like they are pro-Second Amendment that are running for office. I guess, we'll kind of have the opportunity in subsequent videos to go over individual candidates perhaps coming up to the November elections. But overall, how did those PAC endorsed candidates do?
We did really good. We had people in all the different types of races. So like in the state Senate, literally 87% of the people we endorsed made it into the November elections and did really well. We had about 78% of the same thing happen in the assembly. And then as we got down into some other areas, we've had anywhere from 60 to 75%, but there's still a lot of outliers. As you know, the counts in the votes are about 52 to 55% done, depending where you're at. So we still have some races that it's just too close to call yet.
Well, we're certainly going to be keeping an eye on those. And I guess just for the sake of it, we do tend to focus a lot on anti-2A bills, therefore legislators that aren't necessarily friendly to the cause. What ends up being the criteria for somebody to be labeled as pro-Second Amendment and get endorsed by the CRPA PAC?
Well, there's two ways that happens. The first way is if they're brand new in politics, never held office before. Then there is a set of questions and a questionnaire that we send out to them. We get that back, review it. We have a grading scale on that. If they're in a B or A rating, then we have a follow-on discussion with them. If they're not, we don't. We have a lot of candidates that choose not to respond, and so they become known as a DNR or a did not respond, which says a lot about the person and their campaign to our community. And you should feel like if they're not willing to kind of stick their neck out before they get into office, you may not be able to count on them once they're in office. And I'll give a great example of that later on in this video. And I also think it's really important that people realize we do watch people's voting records. We do keep track of those voting records year in, year out. We get a lot of feedback from a lot of our people and communities across the state, what people do at city council races, what they do in school board meetings, what they do at fair board meetings, fire districts, et cetera, and where they stand on some of the issues that affect the Second Amendment. And whether those be positive or negative, that also gets fed into it. And then people that have been elected office, like I just mentioned, it's both the questionnaire and their voting record that goes into it.
And I guess kind of what goes along with that endorsement is also to be a part of the voter guide that CRPA puts out. You guys go ahead and check the link in the description below. Check out the CRPA voter guide right there, because there is still another election in November coming up. That's something that you're going to want to reference. But I guess let's talk about some of those people that maybe didn't score so well on the CRPA voter guide. We followed some of these races very closely during the live stream, and I remember having a whole lot of fun with you on Tuesday when some of this was happening. So I wanted to clump a few of them together. And
before you go into that, I want to say something to all the people watching this. This is really important. It is very easy, and all of us, even on staff, have been there, where you can get down, depressed, like, ugh. I mean, just because this is a long fight. It's a fight that's been going on for almost 250 years. Started off with our first government, the Brits, doing this to us, and ever since, our own government trying to do this to us. But there's a lot to be grateful and happy and excited about. And I'd be a lot more excited if I wasn't fighting a chest cold from hanging out with you guys Tuesday night and screaming and yelling a couple times. But yeah, I think the examples that you pulled up are great examples, and each of these a solid victory that I'm willing to break down.
Well, yeah, let's definitely take a look at some of those examples right now. So I'm going to rattle some stuff off just so that we can completely encompass this, and then I'm really going to ask you not just what your thoughts are, but I'm curious on what the consequences of this is actually going to be immediately and going into the future for the Second Amendment movement in California. But you guys, you got David Min. He authored Senate Bill 264. He gave us Senate Bill 915. Both of these bills sincerely targeted gun shows on state-owned property. One of them was for the whole state. One of them was just for gun shows in Orange County. He also gave us Senate Bill 1384. This is the one that required FFLs to have increased liability insurance, and also it created a situation where FFLs had to spend a lot of money to get surveillance cameras installed permanently where they sell firearms. All of these we are fighting in court right now. David Min is currently in second place in his race. Even if he finishes second place in his race, something that doesn't look so favorable for him going into November.
Yeah, so David Min is one of those puppets for Everytown. I'll just call it where it's at. He's got a lot of money from Everytown, and this ended up being a highly contested race. David Min wanted to go to Congress, wanted to take his show on the road, and all the people you selected have been part of a conglomerate, so to speak, of Gavin Newsom, our governor, that have been proponents of pushing all this anti-Second Amendment legislation, despite the Bruin decision. We've talked about this numerous times. And so David Min was making his move. The move was to send several people to Congress, a couple people to the Senate, and then some people in some more of the prominent cities in California so they could just continue to ramrod this down our throats at all levels. David Min's election for the primary was one of the most expensive in the country. The party divided and backed Joanna Weiss in that run. And this is a victory for us because why? Because they spent $3 million in a primary. In a primary. That's unheard of. And what's funnier is the guy who is winning, Scott Baugh, right now, clearly the front runner in this, spent like $200,000. So they cannibalized themselves. The point is, both of them are damaged. It does look like right now where the vote count is that Min will barely squeak past Joanna Weiss to be the second place person, but he's doing so with like $250,000 versus literally almost 10 times that amount of money in Scott Baugh's coffers. So moving forward, Scott will pick up the other distant Republican that ran in that race, Max DeCrepina. Those votes will go to Scott. And as we look at this, Scott will have a commanding lead. He has the infrastructure, but you also have to look at the damage that was done up and down the line in that district. You have some city council races that people said was a fluke 2 years ago. We at CRPA had a lot of our staff working in a couple of those where there was a massive recall, for example, in Huntington Beach. Instead, what you saw is the same measures that were supposed to go through to help the left failed, and they went through for the people that have common sense. We saw a lot of the candidates up and down the line favor and break in a direction that is pro Second Amendment. And so that says a lot about a district that the Dems thought they had flipped and flipped hard left. And that district is not flipping that way. People are fighting back. And so I'm very excited about this. And plus, we're getting to tell David Min, you got choices. You can waste some more money, and we're more than happy to help you waste it because we're gonna beat you. And this is gonna be another victory, but there's many more.
Well, yeah, it's pretty commonly known that employers are generally turned off by DUIs. I guess it's just good to hear that the California people also can be turned off by that when employing a politician as well. Another one that we've got.
It wasn't just a DUI, Kevin. I mean, I don't know how many times you have broke it down on this channel and said, oh, what, and then insert political person's name. They just lied. Bold-faced lie. This is for me and not for thee kind of a thing. And yet, we showed it on Tuesday night. I thought you did an excellent job of pointing out there was David Min, not once, but multiple times going to a CHP sergeant, going to the people in the car, "Oh, come on, guys. Is there some way we can cover this up? Is there some way?" And people got to see David Min, the real David Min. And people aren't going to forget that.
Yeah, and now, like I guess you said, he's paying for it to the tune of $3 million to potentially lose an election. Let's talk about another one that kind of struck to my heart. This is Melissa Hurtado. Of course, this is the one that we were told she was going to vote against Assembly Bill 28, continuing to make it a zombie bill. You guys, that was the 11% excise tax on all firearms, firearms parts, and ammunition. She then turns around, breaks her word, and votes yes on it, becomes kind of a poster child for it. She is currently in fourth place. Doesn't really look like she has any steam to get through even the primary. How's this one look, Rick?
She's done. And I enjoy saying that. I mean, she lied to our community. She went out there. She forgot who her constituents were, which a good section of them are waterfowl hunters and deer hunters there in the Central Valley. And she decided, like, I don't need you. I can totally trash you. She became a spokesperson for Assemblymember Gabriel in this bill. She flat out lied on, the whole idea that we as hunters had accepted an excise tax on us before because we knew of all the bad things we had done. That wasn't the case. If you go back and look at Pittman Robertson, which is what they're talking, that was a bill that was brought forward by hunting community to be able to save species across the landscape, including many that are never hunted, to preserve them for future generations. So completely misled people, went ahead and did that. And in that race, currently you got Valadeo and Salas. They're both strong first, second picks. It's going to be interesting to see what happens, but either one of those men have been incredibly loyal and faithful to the Second Amendment. You got a Republican and a Democrat, which proves my point. We have some good, solid Democrats. Rudy Salas was always solid when he was inside our state's legislature. And this closes Hurtado from carrying her double standards and her turning on people to the Capitol. So she's not going to Washington, D.C., and her seat is being taken over by other candidates in this race. So guess what? She can't retreat back to where she was from. She's out of office at the end of the year.
Well, let's talk about another big one. And I know a lot of people in Southern California are going to be happy about this, but Anthony Portantino finds himself in a similar situation. You guys, this is the same Anthony Portantino that brought us Senate Bill 906, which required mandatory locked storage, Senate Bill 1327, which partially we fought against and won in court, that raised the standards for prevailing parties. But that one also created an opportunity for private citizens to sue firearms manufacturers, echoing the Texas abortion law that so many Democrats in California called unconstitutional. And of course, this year has authored Senate Bill 1160, calling for an all-out registration of all firearms. Portantino is also not looking too pretty in his campaign. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. He's, I believe, in fourth the last time I looked. And this is really interesting because when he started up on Senate Bill 2, he had already announced his candidacy earlier. If we remember, look back to January of 23, it was after Katie Porter broke ranks, broke all sorts of rules, and said, I'm going to run for Dianne Feinstein's seat, even though Dianne Feinstein was still the sitting senator, still very much alive, and had not announced that she wasn't going to rerun for office. Porter came out and challenged her. The minute Porter came out and challenged her, Schiff joined a couple of days later and said, well, that will be me. That opened up this seat in Portantino's backyard, and Portantino made his announcement on Senate Bill 2, did all that stuff, and said, oh, by the way, I'm going to take these things to DC and do the same thing on the national level, pushing this out. He reiterated those sentiments when the governor said he was going to come out with a new constitutional amendment. We all know he stood up there. He stood up on every time he could on a soapbox. He was taking his show on the road to the nation's capital. No, he's not, because he's completely out of the November final election, and he terms out, and somebody else already ran for his office. So, yeah.
So let's just sort of round this out here. I have a couple more candidates in particular that I want to get to. But here we have three very prominent state legislators that have just brought us so much terrible, unconstitutional legislation, who tried to make a leap this year, and they were told by California citizens, "We do not want you representing us over the other campaigns that are running for these." On a state level, is this just a consequence of picking the wrong time, or are we starting to see a shift in California politics?
I think we're actually starting to see a shift, and there's room for excitement, and then there's room for we got to take advantage of this momentum. You have one other one, and I know you originally were going to talk about him last, but I think this is a good point to bring him in. He had Reggie Jones Sawyer, and Reggie Jones Sawyer authored some bills that are egregious in the firearms community. He didn't author the biggest ones and the worst ones, but he authored many. But what he did do was he was the public safety committee chair in the assembly, and he ran roughshod on that committee. Kevin, I can't tell you how many times I heard good legislation from both sides of the aisle, predominantly Republican, but even from the Democrat, trying to get this back to crime control and holding criminals accountable. And Reggie would have none of that. He's a huge proponent of let people out of jail, and lowering the standards for what makes you a criminal, things of that nature. But going after the Second Amendment community, very honest about it. This is where he stands. He made a move for what some people would argue is an equally high office, because when you get elected to city council in a major city like Chicago, New York, Los Angeles, San Francisco, that could be a launching point to even a bigger career. And so he made the move to become part of the city council in LA and got shut down. And so if you look at these people a year ago, they were all on, hey, this is what we're doing here, and this is where we're taking it next year. And this chain of people are going to work together. Every town and other groups put a lot of money into that chain to try to make it happen. This is a victory, but to make this victory stick and get even bigger, because there's several other contenders that we can knock out. We only had about 25, 26% of the people in California vote. We've got to get a lot of our people. Now is the carpe diem, the seize the day moment for us to really move. And I know the next candidate you want to talk about, there is some incredible possibilities that we started to talk about on Tuesday that look like they're developing.
Yeah, so I guess you have some people who are actually writing a lot of these bills in Sacramento. I would have put Reggie Jones Sawyer more so in the category of facilitator, watching over these committees, kind of blocking stuff that really should be able to be passed while allowing things that he knows is unconstitutional go through the committee hearings and get passed. But yeah, let's bring it to the federal level. You have Katie Porter, who is another facilitator. She sits on the gun violence task force in Congress right now. She's pushing things like Ethan's Law and mandatory background checks, which may already exist in California. But when we talk about how California legislation spreads throughout the nation, she's one of the focal points right now that's actually doing it. She's bringing this bad legislation from California, and she is broadcasting it in Congress at the federal level. She was also running for Dianne Feinstein's seat, and she finds herself out of the loop on that one. So what's that one continue to look like?
So, you brought up an interesting point on Katie Porter. This is one of the things you got to realize when you have congressional leaders who are in part of the tight group that works. And so, people are like, well, how do you link these people, Rick? Well, Katie Porter, if we remember, threw her weight behind David Min to succeed her. So the connection from her to Min and her to Portantino, they all hang out together. Let's make no mistakes about that. And then when they get pieces of legislation across, such as Assembly Bill 28, Kevin, then that's what causes me to get phone calls from states like Colorado that says, guess what just got introduced into our legislature this year? And guess how we got it? And well, it was every town and a couple of California Congress people who handed it over to their state legislature to try to get done. And so now we're having to help Colorado defeat it there. And so what I'm looking at with Katie Porter is, you have a retired baseball player in Steve Garvey who ran this race. And at the very beginning, a lot of people were like, not a snowball's chance, because you had the big three, Lee, Porter, Barbara Lee being out of the San Francisco Bay Area, and Adam Schiff. And they went at it. went after Garvey, mocked him. And currently, there are 2 elections that Garvey and Schiff are leading in. They've knocked out Lee and Porter out of both of them. There's no way to recover that. And those are for fulfilling the term of Dianne Feinstein, and then the actual new term that will start. In the fulfilling the term, Garvey at last count was up by about 150,000 plus votes. So the window that we had talked, the hypothetical, Kevin, on Tuesday night was, hypothetically, it is possible that Garvey could be elected as the senator to fulfill the term of Dianne Feinstein. It'd be a short, like 8-month role, but that would also make him the incumbent in the November election. And that will have a unique impact on that election, because there's not a lot that could go wrong in 8 months as the senator from California, which means he'd be pretty well unblemished, but he would have the title of senator. And on an elected vote, a lot of people would be like, well, he's been in for 8 months. He's done nothing wrong. He's the senator. Leave him there. And so this could turn the November election as well.
Well, certainly more evidence of a political shift in California. A lot of promising things to look forward to in November. Any final thoughts on the election in general and with these 5 specifics?
Yeah, I mean, number one, taking a deep breath of fresh air, because we just got a good breath of it. And number 2 is, don't sit there and go, oh, well, now this will happen on its own. It does not happen on its own. And what this is going to take is us doubling our efforts, tripling our efforts, and making sure, because there will be some people that will look at this and go, uh-oh, we got to get our people out there. And if we don't respond with a bigger uh-oh, then we can lose whatever little momentum we start to gain.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to continue and follow along with these as votes continue to be counted. We want to bring you the most up-to-date information that you can possibly have. Rick, I know you're a busy guy, so I really want to say thank you for taking the time with us today. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you. Always a pleasure.
Absolutely. And guys, if you like this content and videos like these, the algorithms are working in our favor right now, but we are reliant on you to click the like, share, and subscribe buttons. Go ahead and hit that notification bell so that when we drop videos like these, that you are notified as soon as possible so that you can have the most up-to-date information. The goal here has always been to make sure that as many people as possible are as informed as possible going into those November general elections. So thanks again, guys, and we'll see you on the next one.